A peaceful afternoon in Riverside Park would forever change when an elderly African-American woman found herself caught in a nightmare of injustice. What happened next would not only transform lives but spark a movement that would echo across the nation. And at the heart of this extraordinary tale stands none other than the legendary Mike Tyson. If you believe in standing up against injustice, this story will touch your heart. Join our community of truth seekers by subscribing and share in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories of courage and justice to light. Every afternoon, Mike Tyson seeks solitude in Riverside Park after his training sessions. Away from the spotlight and the pressures of fame, he finds peace among the rustling leaves and gentle breezes. For a man whose life has been marked by both triumph and turbulence, these quiet moments are precious. On this particular afternoon, as Mike walked along the maple-lined path, sharp voices shattered the tranquility. Near the duck pond, two police officers, Officers Thompson and Rodriguez, were confronting Rachel Williams, an elderly woman whose only crime was enjoying the afternoon sun from her favorite bench. Before Mrs. Williams could even explain herself, Officer Thompson grabbed her arm with unnecessary force. She lost her balance, tumbling to the ground like a leaf in autumn. The sight made Mike's blood boil. In Mrs. Williams's fearful eyes, he saw reflections of his own past times when he, too, had faced prejudice and powerlessness. If you believe everyone deserves to be treated with dignity regardless of their age or race, hit that subscribe button. Together, we can amplify voices that need to be heard. Several park visitors stopped to watch, their phones raised to record the incident. But no one dared to step forward. No one except Mike Tyson. His eyes, the same ones that had made heavyweight champions tremble, now filled with quiet determination as he approached the scene. "What exactly are you doing?" Mike's voice carried across the park, calm but commanding. "She's just sitting on a bench. Is this how you define justice?" Officer Rodriguez turned, irritation crossing his face. "This isn't your business. Move along before you find yourself in trouble." Mike took a measured breath, keeping his voice steady despite the anger rising in his chest. "This isn't how you treat anyone, especially not an elderly woman who hasn't done anything wrong. Let her go. Now." Officer Thompson smirked at his partner. "Look at this guy. Thinks he's some kind of hero. Doesn't even know who this woman is." He turned back to Mike, his voice dripping with condescension. "We're police officers. We don't need civilians telling us how to do our job. If you're smart, you'll walk away right now." Mike stood his ground, his fists clenched but his mind clear. Years of discipline in the ring had taught him that anger alone never wins the fight. He positioned himself between Mrs. Williams and the officers, becoming a human shield for the frightened woman. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked softly, his eyes never leaving the officers. Before Mrs. Williams could answer, Officer Rodriguez stepped forward aggressively. "I warned you to back off. You're interfering with law enforcement." His hand moved threateningly toward his belt. Mike's voice deepened, carrying the weight of countless battles won. "Interfering with what, exactly? You haven't shown any evidence. Haven't stated any charge. I'm watching you abuse your power against someone who can't defend herself. And I won't stand for it. If you believe in protecting the vulnerable from abuse of power, join our community by subscribing. Let's stand together against injustice." The crowd around them grew larger, phones recording every moment. Whispers rippled through the gathering. "That's Mike Tyson. He's defending her. Someone's finally standing up to them." Officer Rodriguez, realizing who he was facing, attempted to push Mike aside. But Mike remained unmoved, like an oak tree against a breeze. His eyes grew cold, reminiscent of his days in the ring. "I'm not going anywhere. Either explain yourselves properly, or let her go." "Who do you think you are?" Officer Thompson shouted, his face reddening. "Your celebrity status doesn't put you above the law." Mike's response came with a quiet chuckle, but his eyes remained intense. "This isn't about who I am. This is about what's right. Look around you, everyone's recording. Do you want to be the next viral video showing police brutality? The crowd's energy shifted, voices growing bolder. "Let her go!" someone shouted. "Stop the abuse of power!" called another. Officer Thompson glanced nervously at the growing number of witnesses, but Officer Rodriguez remained defiant. "I don't care who's watching," Rodriguez snarled. "You're obstructing justice, and that's going to land you in serious trouble." Mike leaned forward slightly, his presence commanding respect. "Trouble doesn't scare me, especially when I'm doing what's right. But you should be worried. What you're doing today won't just affect your badges, it'll erode public trust in every good officer who actually serves and protects. If you believe that those who abuse power should be held accountable, show your support by subscribing. Your voice matters in the fight for justice." The tension in the air was electric as Mike continued to hold his ground. The crowd had swelled to over 50 people, their phones raised like torches of truth. A young woman's voice cut through the tension. "We see you. This isn't right." An elderly man stepped forward, his voice shaking with anger. "She was just sitting here. You have no cause." Officer Rodriguez, his authority crumbling under the weight of public scrutiny, barked at the crowd. "All of you need to disperse. You're interfering with police business. One more word and you'll all be arrested for disturbing the peace." These threats only fueled the crowd's indignation. An elderly woman, her silver hair catching the afternoon sun, called out with trembling determination. "No one here fears your empty threats. This isn't justice. This is tyranny in a uniform." Mike Tyson remained steadfast, a mountain of resolve between Mrs. Williams and her aggressors. "Let her go," he repeated, his voice carrying the weight of conviction. "Everyone here is witnessing your actions. If you care about your careers, about the badge you wear, stop this now." Officer Thompson looked uncertainly at his partner, sweat beading on his forehead. But Officer Rodriguez, pride overwhelming judgment, growled, "Get her in the car. We can't let them think we're weak. If you believe that strength lies in standing up for others, not in forcing them down, subscribe to join our movement for change." Just as Rodriguez moved toward Mrs. Williams, the distant wail of police sirens cut through the tension. A patrol car pulled up to the scene, and from it emerged Lieutenant Marcus Harrison, his face etched with concern and authority. The crowd parted as he approached, his experienced eyes taking in every detail of the scene. "What exactly is going on here?" Lieutenant Harrison's voice carried years of command. His gaze swept from his officers to Mike Tyson, then to Mrs. Williams, still handcuffed and trembling. Officer Thompson straightened, relief flickering across his face. "Sir, we're attempting to apprehend a suspect, but this civilian is obstructing us and inciting the crowd." Mike stepped forward, meeting Harrison's scrutiny with unwavering conviction. "With all due respect, Lieutenant, that's not what's happening here. These officers are abusing their power. This woman was simply sitting on a bench, harming no one. Without warning or cause, they attacked her, threw her to the ground, and handcuffed her. They haven't stated any charges or shown any evidence. If you stand against injustice and believe in protecting the innocent, hit that subscribe button. Together, we can make a difference." Lieutenant Harrison turned to his officers, his voice sharp as a razor. "Do you have probable cause? Any evidence? Reports matching her description?" Officer Thompson stammered. We thought she matched the description of a suspect from this morning's briefing. We acted on instinct, sir." Harrison's eyebrow arched dangerously. "Instinct? Or prejudice? Show me the exact reports. Now." The silence that followed spoke volumes. Officer Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably, unable to meet his superior's gaze. Harrison turned to Mike, his tone softening slightly. "Thank you, Mr. Tyson, for intervening. This isn't what our department stands for. I'll handle this situation personally." He then barked at his officers. "Remove those handcuffs immediately and clear this area. Both of you will report to my office first thing tomorrow." The crowd erupted in cheers as Officer Thompson reluctantly removed Mrs. Williams's handcuffs. Someone shouted, "Mike Tyson stood up for justice." Another voice called out, This is what a real hero looks like. If you believe in celebrating those who stand up for what's right, subscribe and share this story. Let's inspire more people to take action against injustice. Mike didn't acknowledge the cheers. Instead, he gently helped Mrs. Williams to her feet. "Are you all right, ma'am? Let me help you get somewhere safe." Mrs. Williams nodded, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks as Mike carefully guided her away from the scene. But this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of a movement that would transform a community. What happened next would prove that one person's courage could ignite a flame of change that would spread far beyond Riverside Park. As Mike Tyson helped Mrs. Williams settle on a bench away from the chaos, he turned to address the still-gathering crowd. His voice carried not just anger, but a deep sense of purpose and responsibility. What we witness today happens too often in our communities. An innocent woman doing nothing wrong was harassed and assaulted by those sworn to protect her. If we hadn't been here, if no one had spoken up, would justice have been served? If you believe silence in the face of injustice makes us complicit, subscribe to join our movement for change. His words resonated through the park as phones continued recording, streaming this moment of truth to thousands across social media. Within hours, the incident would capture national attention, forcing a spotlight on systemic issues too long ignored. Lieutenant Harrison stepped forward, raising his hand for silence. "As a police officer of 25 years, I'm ashamed of what I've witnessed today. This incident betrays everything our badge represents. I promise you all, there will be a thorough investigation, and those responsible will face consequences." Mike fixed Harrison with an unwavering gaze. "Promises are good, Lieutenant, but actions speak louder. This isn't just about two officers. It's about a system that allowed them to think they could act this way without consequences." The story spread like wildfire across social media platforms. Hashtag Justice in Riverside Park and hashtag Tyson Stands Up began trending nationwide. News outlets picked up the story, broadcasting the footage captured by witnesses. The video of Mike Tyson, once known for his power in the ring, now standing as a shield for justice, touched millions. If you believe in the power of unity to create change, subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments below. Within days, the police department faced unprecedented pressure. Lieutenant Harrison, true to his word, initiated a comprehensive investigation. An independent review board was established, comprising civil rights attorneys, community leaders, and law enforcement experts. The investigation revealed disturbing patterns. Officers Thompson and Rodriguez had multiple complaints filed against them for excessive force, particularly targeting minorities and elderly citizens. These complaints had been systematically buried or dismissed, protected by a culture of silence. Public hearings were held, where Mrs. Williams, now known to the community as Rachel, shared her story. Her voice, though soft, carried the weight of years of similar injustices. "I've lived in this neighborhood for 40 years, she testified. "That day, I was just enjoying the sunshine, like I've done hundreds of times before. But in their eyes, I was suspicious just for existing." If you believe everyone deserves to feel safe in their own community, join our channel's mission for justice. Mike Tyson attended every hearing, his presence a reminder that power, when used correctly, could protect rather than oppress. In one particularly moving session, he spoke about why he intervened. "I've faced many opponents in the ring, but the toughest fights are the ones we face every day on our streets. When I saw Mrs. Williams being treated like that, I saw my mother, my grandmother, every person who's ever been powerless against abuse. Sometimes, standing up is the only choice we have." The investigation's findings were damning. Beyond the individual actions of Thompson and Rodriguez, it exposed systemic failures in training, oversight, and accountability. Lieutenant Harrison, with full departmental support, implemented sweeping reforms. Mandatory de-escalation training for all officers' body cameras with automatic uploads to an independent server, a civilian oversight committee with real power to investigate complaints, cultural sensitivity training led by community members, regular community forums where citizens could voice concerns directly to police leadership. If you believe in supporting positive change in law enforcement, subscribe to see more stories of transformation and hope. But the impact reached far beyond police reform. The incident sparked a broader conversation about community responsibility and collective action. Local organizations established neighborhood watch programs, not to police their communities, but to protect vulnerable members and document interactions with law enforcement. Mrs. Williams, supported by community leaders, started a program called Bridges of Trust, bringing together elderly residents and local police officers for monthly dialogues. These conversations, sometimes difficult but always necessary, began breaking down barriers of misunderstanding and fear. Mike Tyson's role evolved from that of an intervening hero to a sustained voice for change. He regularly spoke at community meetings, emphasizing that true strength lies not in domination, but in protection and service. 6 months after the incident, Riverside Park transformed into a symbol of community renewal. The bench where Mrs. Williams had sat became known as Justice Point, decorated with fresh flowers daily by local residents. But more importantly, real change took root in the community's soul. If you believe that lasting change starts with individual actions, subscribe to witness more stories of transformation. The police department's transformation became a model for other cities. Lieutenant Harrison, now promoted to captain, regularly received requests to share their reform program. The changes weren't just superficial. They reached deep into the department's culture. New officers underwent immersive community integration training, spending their first month working alongside social workers and community leaders before ever putting on a uniform. Veteran officers participated in weekly community service, not as authority figures, but as neighbors and friends. Officer Thompson and Officer Rodriguez faced the consequences of their actions. The disciplinary board, backed by overwhelming evidence, terminated their employment. Criminal charges for civil rights violations and excessive force were filed, sending a clear message that abuse of power would no longer be tolerated. If you stand against abuse of power and believe in accountability, join our community by subscribing. Mrs. Williams, whose quiet afternoon had sparked this revolution, became an unexpected leader in her own right. Speaking at a community gathering 6 months later, her voice strong and clear, she shared, "That day, I thought I was alone. But Mike Tyson showed me that heroes exist in unexpected places. Now I know that none of us are truly alone when we stand together for what's right." The Bridges of Trust program she founded expanded to 30 cities across the country. Senior citizens who once feared law enforcement became active participants in community policing initiatives. Their wisdom and experience helped shape policies that protected the vulnerable while maintaining public safety. Mike Tyson's involvement didn't fade with the headlines. He established the Champions of Justice Foundation, providing legal support to victims of police brutality and funding body camera programs for smaller police departments. If you believe in supporting grassroots movements for positive change, subscribe and share this story with others who care. Local schools incorporated the Riverside Park incident into their civics curriculum, teaching students about civil rights, community responsibility, and the power of standing up for others. Children wrote essays about what they would have done in that situation, learning early that courage often means being the first to speak up. The park itself underwent a transformation. Community members raised funds to install better lighting, security cameras, and emergency call boxes. But more importantly, they created a space where people from all walks of life could gather without fear. Regular unity in the park events brought together police officers, community members, and local leaders for informal gatherings. Children played basketball with officers who now wore friendly smiles instead of intimidating scowls. Elderly residents shared stories with young recruits, building bridges of understanding across generations. If you believe in the power of community to heal divisions, subscribe to see more inspiring stories of transformation. The media attention eventually faded, but the changes remained. Crime rates dropped not because of aggressive policing, but because the community and law enforcement learned to work together. Trust, once shattered, slowly rebuilt through daily acts of mutual respect and understanding. 1 year after the incident, during a memorial ceremony at Justice Point, Mike Tyson reflected on the transformation. What happened here wasn't just about one afternoon or 2 bad officers. It was about choosing what kind of community we want to be. When we stand together against injustice, when we protect our most vulnerable, we create something powerful. We create hope. Mrs. Williams, standing beside him, added with a gentle smile, "And hope is what changes the world." If you believe that every person has the power to spark positive change, subscribe and become part of our growing community of changemakers. The story of Riverside Park became more than a viral video or a news headline. It became a testament to the power of individual courage and collective action. It proved that change doesn't require violence or hatred. It requires conviction, compassion, and the willingness to stand up when others sit down. As the sun set over Riverside Park that evening, casting long shadows across Justice Point, the gathered community members represented something profound. A promise that wherever injustice appears, there will always be those ready to stand against it. This isn't just a story about Mike Tyson or Mrs. Williams or a park in an American city. It's a story about all of us, about the choice we face when confronted with injustice. Will we walk away, or will we stand up? If you believe in the power of storytelling to inspire change, subscribe to our channel. Share where you're watching from, and let us know how you're making a difference in your community. Together, we can create the change we wish to see in the world. Because in the end, justice isn't just a word, it's an action. And it begins with people like you choosing to make a stand. Remember, only those who believe in remaining silent in the face of injustice would choose not to subscribe. Join our community of changemakers today.